Here.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Here.
Chairman Meredith.
Present. Just a moment, we may have a technical difficulty here. That's what happens, you become a slave to technology.
Yeah, for some reason the audio won't record. He's gone.
All right, pardon the interruption. First item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes of September 13th meeting of the committee. Is there a motion that they be considered as being approved? Motion by Representative Hart, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Hi.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling, Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Total number of items on the agenda today are 476 in the amount of $271,979,444.64. All vendors are registered with the Secretary of State's office. Next is the deferred list, which is from the August PSC amendment list. And it's our understanding that the agency wants to defer this item to November.
Motion to defer.
Motion to defer by Co-Chair Cook. Is there a second? Second by Senator Douglas. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Again, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Hi.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling, Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Aye.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Next order of business is consideration of the agenda, including the personal service contract list, the PSC amendment list, memorandum of agreement list, memorandum of agreement amendment list, and the Kentucky Entertainment Incentive Program agreement list, except for those items selected for further review. Is there a motion to consider the contracts reviewed without objection?
So moved.
Motion by Co-Chair Cook, seconded by Senator Douglas. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Hi.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling, Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Aye.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. We're going to go just a little bit out of order this morning to accommodate an agency request. So the first item on the pulled list to be considered is with the Kentucky Historical Society is number 36 on the routine PSC green list. If representatives are here, and I see that they are, please come forward and identify yourself for the record. Mr. Is your mic on? Should have a green light.
Oh, there we go. I'll do it
Try
again.
From the top.
From
Take
the
it
top.
Yeah.
First of all, let me say thank you for having us today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this project and this contract. My name is Scott Alvey. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Historical Society, and I have with me today Karen Marlowe. She's our Director of Finance and Operations, also with us at the Historical Society.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alvey. Very rarely do people thank us for the opportunity to be here, but we certainly appreciate that and glad to have your company.
I always love a chance to talk Kentucky history. So,
Well, we'll see if you still feel the same way. Senator Southworth has questions for you.
sure.
Thank you. Well, that was really my question in that I don't feel like we are talking about Kentucky history. With this, I was trying to get a better handle on exactly the nature of the contract and a couple of things. I'll just head off so you know kind of what the scope of my question is. There are a lot of businesses and professions out there that we think of in dealing with trauma, and the museums are not in that list. Now, generally speaking, everybody has stress, but my question is why we need a special vendor here for a special training that probably has already been done somewhere else in state government and we need a copy and paste. I'm just trying to get a handle on how in
Sure.
the world we got to here
Sure.
with this contract.
Sure. So, in one of the aspects that we deal with quite often, topics from, and I'm working on a project right now, looking at the history of Kentucky women veterans. So, when we do displays and exhibits and things like that, we have to be considerate of what might be triggers of trauma for any of the audience members that might come in. Again, we have several with some of the recent activities that have gone on, tornadoes out in western Kentucky, the flooding in eastern Kentucky. So a couple of different elements on how this comes to that and how those all relate. We had an opportunity to, it would have been June of 2021, received a quilt called the Mask Maker's Quilt with some other items that went along with it. One of the ideas that we thought about doing was traveling that around the Commonwealth, because the pandemic had more to do with not just dealing with the virus but all the different aspects that were going along with it. So this tells a really interesting story about how people were being resilient and how they were coming together in their communities to deal with this global pandemic and all the things that came along with it. So as that was about to be traveled out, we thought it was a high priority for us to make sure that as it went into those communities, that's the staff that was going to have the exhibit there would be well prepared in case somebody did have a traumatic response, having been experiencing the displays and the exhibit that we were traveling around. As far as museums doing that, I would say that that's actually one of the things that we do deal with. So much as in not maybe directly providing traumatic services to people, but helping to prepare our staff for recognizing that if somebody is having a traumatic response within something that we're doing, how we might best assist them, or even in the development of how we can intentionally make sure that we're not building triggers into our displays and our exhibits that might create that same traumatic response. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but I think we do a lot of training. I've done museum works now for almost 30 years, and we do a lot to just make sure our frontline staff are prepared for example, if a child comes in and has some sort of experience. I did science museum work, so if there was some sort of experience that they had, at least we knew to pause and take a stop to make sure that we were addressing what they were doing. So I know that was a long-winded answer to it, and I don't know if there's more clarification I could provide.
That does sound really cool. I'm just looking at the actual words of the contract, and I don't really see that in here. So either it's hidden in here somewhere, or else I'm not entirely sure that it accomplishes the goal. Because, I mean, we all have to use what examples we can, but it says we're going to have these two-day trainings, and day 2 says, each participant is to identify at least one thing they need to engage in to manage stress. And so it sounded more like a staff stress thing rather than a how to recognize triggers in other people, how to address kids who come into science museums. I mean, none of that's in here.
Gotcha. And I apologize, I haven't had a chance to review that. We did day 1 of the training, and it was actually a self look at it so that we can help identify, so people that we have in our staff would see these examples in themselves. Day 2 of it is somewhat in a more simple, train the trainer. So they're currently working on what those ideas and what those elements are, so that we would be prepared to go out and talk to staff, or to at least help staff provide at least a basic training when this exhibit travels into other communities, but then also just as a piece of good, just museum function, I guess, to be able to help other museums with this kind of training. So yeah, I apologize that it's not in there. One thing I would also want to point out that I don't know is in the material that you all have, and I apologize, I found out about the hearing late yesterday. And so this is also a federally funded grant that we're working through. So we do have a match to that, and I don't know if that is in the material that you have. And I'll let Karen speak more to that end.
Is there a green
There you go.
The PSC actually is one piece of of a federal grant from the IMLS. What is IMLS?
Institute of Museum and Library Services.
Services. It's one piece of a grant that was applied for, and we obtained. It's around $76,000 grant, and so this trauma training and train the trainer for our staff that will be going into community outreach for other institutions that decide to show this quilt, and other projects we have out in the community is to help. And IMLS recognized that train the trainer was important for museum services, and so we put the PSC through. We have a particular piece of that grant that we have to match, and we put the PSC through as part of that match.
I don't show there's any state funds involved here. It says it's 100% federal, so you can talk to us about
Yes.
the matching funds. And is that from your general budget, or
That's
where are
the
the
other
matching funds coming
pieces
from?
of the total grant. The total grant is $76,000. The 27.5 is part of that grant.
And the match is not being calculated on this part of the grant?
No, correct. That is correct.
I appreciate your answers. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if I even know what to say, because sometimes these things, I know it's hard to get real life onto paper, but it also concerns me when we have all kinds of activity going on that I don't think's really in the paper, and I don't know how to really make those match, but I appreciate the information.
Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Albee, I'm just a simple guy, and I've listened to what you've said. Could you help the people of the Commonwealth understand a little bit better how you come up with the numbers for these 2 days, the cost?
I'm going to let Karen answer that, because we actually, it ran through the procurement process, and so it went out for competitive bid, and this is the bid that we received.
Then could you explain to the people of the Commonwealth what they're getting for their money?
We have a breakdown of her cost representation. There is a part of it that is, I think I've got it right here. Part of it is her travel. She is from out of state. The training, the company that is doing this for us. Part of it's travel, part of it's supplies. Each day is a customized program for museums and our staff, the staff that is expected to go out and do community outreach. So there's a training cost each day. I think I've got it right here somewhere among the stuff. There was a cost each day, and there is a travel allotment, and then there is supply list. I think. Here we go. We have $11,000 per day, $2,500 for planning time and meetings, which there were several meetings. And then travel cost and supplies is $3,000.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the training per day costs included all the training for a customized training to Senator Southworth's point, to help make sure it was modified towards museum type practices.
And state government, too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
We've got a motion by Representative Hart and a second by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm even more concerned now that I just heard that we're getting it tailored to state government and to museums. I'm afraid or concerned about the quality of the vendor. In fact, if they're not used to working in a public service and they're out of state, I mean, all these things kind of stack up to kind of a 3 strikes. So I'm going to vote no right now.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. And Mr. Alvey, Ms. Marlowe, appreciate you being with us this morning. Hope it's been a positive experience for you. It has been for us.
Still
It's always
has.
a learning
Thank you all very
experience.
much.
Very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day. Next item on the pull list with the Administrative Office of the Courts is number 1 on the routine PSC list. If representatives are here, please come forward and identify yourself for the record.
Morning. My name's Jenny Lafferty. I'm the Director of Finance Administration for the AOC, and I have with me Tammy Brown, who's Executive Officer of the Department of Financial Services.
Good morning. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Just for the committee's information, the reason I requested this contract be pulled, if you look at the dates on the contract, it says July 1, 2022. So the first question I had was, why isn't this a retroactive approval? And I've had a lot of correspondence with these folks over the last couple of days trying to explain what's going on. And quite truthfully, I think the more we tried to figure out what's going on, the more muddled it got. So I've asked these people to come here and try to explain what's going on as to why there was not a retroactive approval, and quite truthfully, why this may just be an administrative issue, but why this wasn't presented as a PSC amendment. So can you proceed from there?
Yeah, I think that, as Tammy may have mentioned in some of the correspondence, we actually would propose to remove it from the list of new Pond 2s because I think it was inadvertently issued as a new Pond 2 by one of our staff members. It should have been an amendment to the existing Pond 2, which I think is Pond 2025 224546, which was effective July 1. So we're just changing a little bit of the language in the contract. There's no modification to the time. There's no modification to the dates. Just changing some of the language in the contract, and it should have been issued as an amendment. So procedurally going forward, I would defer to you. I don't know whether we can pull it in this meeting and have you consider it as an amendment, or whether we just need to pull it.
Well, again, as we tried to figure out what's going on with this, the story got a little bit deeper, and I've got a couple other questions for you.
Absolutely.
I understand, and what we're asking for is the additional funds will be used for what purpose?
There's no additional funds being asked for. There's $40,000 that's already on the contract, and those $40,000 are going to be used for these services. And what it is our bond counsel will typically handle judicial center projects at their inception and setting up the bonds. We also have some services on the bond counsel contract for them to take care of specific things that come up at the end of the bond, at the end of the debt service, like arbitrage rebate calculations or those sort of things. What we'd never have done is included specific language about transferring projects, the ownership of the projects at the conclusion of the debt service payment, which comes 20 years after the projects begin. And the reason we've never done that is because these projects have never been transferred to the state of Kentucky, to the Commonwealth of Kentucky before. But we had our first project this year in Hardin County, where the county took a vote, passed an ordinance, and said that they would not accept ownership of the project, which was how the original bond documents were written. And so we needed to ask our bond counsel to go back and redo some of those documents so that it would then transfer to the Administrative Office of the Courts as opposed to the county government. So because of that, because the original bond documents were done 20 years ago by a different bond counsel, who was bond counsel at that time, we needed to add some service rates and services for bond counsel to come in and do that at the conclusion of the project.
Well, that's where that story kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and I want to make sure the committee members heard this. Is historically, upon completion or payment of the debt of these projects, the ownership reverts to county government. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I guess this is the first time in the history of our Commonwealth we have had a county that refused to accept ownership for the facilities.
That's correct.
And what's the story behind that?
The story behind it is that the county didn't actually issue the bonds 20 years ago when the bonds were issued. It was issued by the city. And the city of Elizabethtown had never expected to take ownership of the property. And I think it's a local issue, is the best that I can understand, that the county does not now want to accept the ownership because it's been owned by the Public Properties Corporation of the city of Elizabethtown. I think there's some HVAC issues in the building right now that we are addressing, that the AOC has gone in. We've received an appropriation in the last legislative session to address the HVAC issues. And so we're working on those now. We've got a temporary chiller that's been put in so that they were made a little more comfortable during the summer. But I think that the county probably saw some of the issues that the building was having while the city owned it, and was a little leery of taking it over. But that's, conjecture.
Again, as part of this program, if we can call it that once a county takes ownership of the building, then that building is leased back to the cabinet. Is that correct?
Once the county takes ownership of the building, KRS Chapter 26A requires the AOC to pay the county for all of the operating costs of the portion of the building that the state occupies. And in most of these buildings, it's going to be 100%. So we're required to pay all of the operating costs, the insurance, all of the janitorial, the maintenance, the utilities, all of the operating costs. And then for buildings that were authorized prior to the year 2000, there is a 2% use allowance that is paid to the county.
And is that paid retrospectively? I mean, is it a cost based, or how's the lease determined?
So the operating costs, we have auditors that audit facilities annually, and they determine what the annual costs are, and then we pay in advance for the next fiscal year based on what the audit shows that expenses were for the current fiscal year.
Does that include depreciation on the facility itself, or is this just cash payment?
Just cash payment.
So what happens at the end of the life of that particular facility? Does AOC come back in and build a new
Right.
facility, or is that the county's responsibility? Or
Right. So what would happen is the county would own the facility. It would belong to the county to do with whatever they chose. We do assessments of all of the facilities on a periodic basis. So what we would do is an assessment. We'd make a recommendation to the General Assembly about which projects would need to be completed for that biennium, along with our budget request. And then, the General Assembly would authorize in our budget bill which projects to be completed for that biennium. So the goal is for these projects to last, decades and decades. And then when they're ready to be replaced, for us to have a new project. And many counties, I think, are choosing to use the location where their existing courthouse is, to build a new project. And some, have other plans for that building. And if they have other plans for that building, then we go somewhere else.
so in this specific situation, the state takes ownership of the building and is responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and so forth. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And the opportunity for the county at some future point in time to assume that facility, is that still there, or?
We would be very pleased to turn the facility over to the county at some point if the county would like to do that.
All right, thank you. Only other question I have is, you said this is not an additional amount, that it's in the original contract.
Right, the $40,000 is in the original contract.
Well, again, I don't understand the mechanics of this thing, that it's coming back to us for whatever reason.
Because we're amending the language of the contract to include the new deeds and lien releases that are required at the end of the project, we wanted to be clear for an audit trail for our folks that those things are things that can be paid under this contract. So we just added that to the language of the contract. And when we do that, it pushes it through as a modification, or it should have pushed it through as a modification in EMARS. In this case, we inadvertently entered a new pontoon number.
Well, I hope you can understand the reason for my questions is, again, it looks
Absolutely.
like it's retrospective.
Absolutely.
Retroactive, but it also looks like it's an additional services that my original thinking was there should have been a separate RFP for this if it's an extension of services, but you say it's not. So very convoluted situation, and I always tell people when they come for this committee, you should be thankful, because we're like the good housekeeping seal of approval. Once we say it's good, it's good, but this one is a little bit troubling, even though it's $40,000, but the bureaucracy around it is not as straightforward as it should be. So I just caution everyone going forward that it needs to be more transparent than what it has appearance of doing. I'll disapprove.
Disapprove.
Yeah. No, approve. Yeah. Sorry, we're kind of having a discussion about how procedure we move forward, because I understand you want to withdraw
Right.
this contract.
Right.
Will we see it back here as a PSC amendment?
You will.
Okay, all righty.
Motion to withdraw.
Motion by Co-Chair Cook. Second by Representative Bowling. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries. And thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for the clarification, additional information. It's always interesting.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day. Next item on the pull list is with Department for Workforce Investment, is number 4 on the PSC green list and 50 on the MOA pink list. If representatives are here, please come forward, identify yourself for the record.
Good morning. Orrin McFarland, Deputy General Counsel, Education and Labor Cabinet.
Good morning, Dondra Meredith, Deputy General Counsel, Education and Labor.
Appreciate you being here this morning. I've got questions, but bear with me here as I find my notes. Specific to number 4, it's a contract for $260,000, and it's to provide funds to design, implement, and external evaluation of the Re-Employment Services Eligibility Assessment Program. That's a lot of words for whatever you're trying to accomplish here, but can you explain that program just a little bit?
Sure. Happy to do that. For several years, the U.S. Department of Labor funds the Voluntary Unemployment Insurance Reemployment Services and Eligibility Assessment. I call it RECE, like the cups, program, and that is to address individual reemployment needs of UI claimants, as well as prevent and detect improper benefit payments. There are 4 purposes to this program. Reduce UI duration through improved employment outcomes, strengthen UI and program integrity, promote alignment with the vision of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and establish RECE as an entry point to other workforce system partners like the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, adult education, things like that. The state participation in this program is voluntary. However, I think it's something like 47 states do participate in it, including Kentucky. The services provided include in-person meetings at the Kentucky Career Centers with staff, eligibility assessments, as well as reemployment services, whether that's resume assistance or job search assistance, things of that nature. Pursuant to a training and employment guidance letter, we call those TEGLs. This one is number 619. In accordance with the statutory provisions for RECE contained in the Social Security Act, states are expected to begin conducting evaluations of RECE interventions and service delivery strategies to support building new evidence on effective RECE interventions that all states can rely on in designing and implementing this program. In fact, Section 306C of the Social Security Act requires states to use RECE grant funds for evidence-based interventions and evaluations. States must begin conducting rigorous studies to produce new evidence that helps determine the success of the program, and that's where this contract comes in. This contract was awarded pursuant to an RFP. It was seeking a vendor to conduct those kinds of studies that we just talked about. There was one solicitation received. It was from the company, the Policy and Research Group, which is out of New Orleans, Louisiana. They provided all required items, including a signed and completed solicitation, proposed technical solution, proposed cost solution, proof of registration with the Kentucky Secretary of State, and all required affidavits. And it was determined that that was the appropriate vendor to award this contract.
Well, excellent explanation, but you lost me just a little bit in that you said it's voluntary, but then you said it's mandatory.
Well, participation in the program is voluntary. However, if you're going to participate in the program, you must do these evidence-based evaluations.
Appreciate that clarification.
Yes, sir.
Upon the exhaustion of these federal funds, what happens then?
Well, we have to continue, if we want to continue with the program. I think if you apply to continue with the program, show that you've done your annual reporting as well as these evidence-based evaluations, and then the federal government will approve or deny continuation of the state's participation in the program.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the committee? If not, entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion by Representative Hart, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion, vote aye. All opposed, vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to the MOA agreement list, number 50. And some of you folks are a little bit clairvoyant, and you know why I've asked you here. It said dreaded retroactive approval request. So can you explain that?
Sure. This agreement was the companion agreement to one that was on the pulled list last month that provides the WIOA funds to the local areas. It received approval from the Finance Cabinet on the morning of September 1st. So we just missed being on last month's agenda. We've talked about this for the past couple months, the steps the Cabinet has taken and continues to take in order to avoid this. I'm happy to report that there were no retroactive contracts submitted to Finance in the month of September.
Hallelujah.
And so I like to think that that shows that the steps that are being taken are working.
I appreciate that. Any other questions, comments regarding this particular contract? Not entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, excuse me, that was Representative Hart. Was it Senator Douglas was the second? All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries, and appreciate you being here this morning, but I'm looking forward to not seeing you next week. Okay?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next item on the pull list are with the Department of Education. And note that Department of Education is requesting deferral on number 56 on the routine MOA pink list and number 120 and 121 on the MOA amendment tan list. So do we have a motion to defer these three items? So there's motion by Co-Chair Cook, seconded by Representative Bowling. All in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling,
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries. With that, our guests are at the table. Please identify yourself for the record, and we will proceed.
Good morning. My name is Karen Worth. I'm the director in the Division of Budgets and Financial Management.
Crystal Rowland. I'm the director of the Division of Program Standards of the Kentucky Department of Education.
Good morning, Thomas Tucker. I'm the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer with the Kentucky Department of Education. A pleasure to be here this morning.
And also we have Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton online.
Good morning.
Good morning. I appreciate you being here. We're starting a discussion of contract number 5 on the PSC routine green list, and I requested this be pulled. And this is regarding a contract with the hands-on therapy PSC to provide speech therapy services. But the note is not practical or feasible but bid document. And I read the explanation, and I don't know that it's as clear as it could be, should be. So that's why I request this contract be pulled. What I see is you certainly have an emergency situation. I don't doubt that. But there was not an RFP for this particular service?
There was not.
Right. I can talk a little bit about that if it would be helpful. We actually reached out to a couple of service providers because, as you noticed, we are in an emergency situation because we have students who are required to have these speech and language services as part of their individual education programs. And we had a speech language path resign immediately before the start of school, I think around August 2nd. And school started back August 15th. So we knew we were going to have students who, frankly, had probably already been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, facing a situation where we weren't able to provide speech and language services. And so, obviously, one goal would be to comply with the law. The second goal, and probably the most important, is that our students get the services to which they're entitled to. So we, staff from the schools, reached out to a couple of different service providers, one of which didn't have any speech therapists to service our IEPs. So we moved forward with the service provider that did have speech pathologists so that we could get services to our students on the ground as quickly and as effectively as possible. And also, as a side note, we had posted this position. Actually, we've kept it up ongoing since I think July, when we first found out that our SLP was resigning, and we've not had any viable candidates. There's a state and national shortage there if you look in the Kentucky Employment Services, there's 100 in the 120 days, there's been 29 positions remaining available for speech language paths. I mean, it's just a critical shortage area, not only in Kentucky, but nationwide. So that's just the background and the rationale for why we went the direction that we did.
I appreciate that, and I have no doubt that the need for the service, obviously, it's very, very important. My question is always about the process more often than not, and if there's no RFP, we reach out to vendors. Who reached out to those vendors?
Our director of special education at the school. I honestly, I don't know if she did it herself or if the principals did, but there was contact made.
Well, again, it's going to sound like a rhetorical question, don't mean it as such, but why these particular vendors? Because folks have worked with them before? Is that the primary criteria?
We have worked with them before. And honestly, I think those two were the only ones that we really were aware of. We have worked with the hands-on therapy for a number of years at the Kentucky School for the Deaf. We've had a contract with them to provide other related services, and they've been exceptional to work with our students. And as you know, our students at KSB and KSD often are not, have multiple disabilities and are a unique population. So they have done fantastic at KSD. We had actually used hands-on therapy at KSB for a short time while a year or so ago, when our SLP speech language path, went on maternity leave, and they were phenomenal with their students. And so we reached out to the two service entities that we were aware of, and the one didn't have anybody to perform the services, and hands-on therapy did. So we engaged in that contract. It is also important for me to note that we have the position is still open. It's going to be open until it's filled. We are actively working to try to get that position posted or to get it filled, but we're really just doing all that we can. But most importantly, we didn't want our students to be there without any services. And at times the RFP process, as you know, can take many, many months. And we honestly didn't have months because our students couldn't have been in a situation where we had nobody to provide any speech language services. It would have been detrimental to many of our kids.
Well, possibly not. And it goes to the root of my concern again, is I hear so many times with sole source contracts that we've worked with these people before and we've got a comfortable relationship, and sometimes it gets a little bit too comfortable, And as a result, I'm not sure we always get value for a dollar, or it doesn't open up the opportunity for other people to participate if they want to. And that's just always a point of concern. I'm sure these folks are quality. I understand the urgency situation, but I'm not sure that there shouldn't be a stronger process in place to try to identify other vendors to make sure that we're getting the utmost value for the dollar that's being expended. And again, if we're relying on just one person to say, well, I worked with these two folks with groups before, I'm not sure that's a category endorsement of the contract. But again, I'm not opposed to the contract. I'm just not comfortable with the process. But Senator Southworth, you have a question, comment regarding this?
I think Senator Yates was ahead of me. Is that? I kind of want to hear what he had to say.
Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, and some of it was kind of explained, and I realize with supply and demand, prices go up. But fulfilling this position, is it comparable to the previous contracts that have been put in place, the price?
It's difficult to compare the two, and the reason why is because with a full-time provider, we would provide not only the salary but also the fringe benefits, in the same manner that a local district would, whereas the individuals that perform the services as part of this contract are paid hourly. So we would provide, them the hourly rate, whereas, and that could be, it could be much more if they spend a lot of time on the ground. It could be much less if they spend fewer hours on the ground. Whereas with a full-time employee, we're going to have a set salary rather than an hourly rate.
If I may have one follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
So obviously, and I know that the particular situation with this pathologist is a little bit different here, but you would know what your expectations are as far as time spent with the students. And so you can, and while the fringe benefits and salary is different, you still would know if the $129,000 is comparable to that of the previous salary with the fringe benefits put in place. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably within the same area. Is one more than the other? Where are we at?
The contract would probably be a little more than a person if you look just at salary, but if you calculate it in fringe, all the retirement and health and everything, I would say it's pretty comparable.
Okay.
Karen may want to weigh in on that from the fiscal aspect, but in the limited knowledge that I have, I think it's relatively comparable.
I would agree. Yes.
Senator Southworth.
Thank you. I thought we were heading toward the comparison to the contract that it sounds like we had last year while the other person was on maternity leave. And I wanted to get a better handle on, was that contract also a not practical feasible to bid, or was it RFP'd because we knew the person was, for 9 months, we know they're going to be going on maternity leave?
I honestly can't remember. I would need to go back and double check that to say for certain. I just don't remember.
Okay, well, here's just a suggestion on how we rectify these issues in the future. If we have one speech language pathologist who we know is going to go on maternity leave, and then in another case, we have one at this other school. Of course, they're both contracted through the Department of Education, so I'm not 100% sure why this can't just be an amendment if we have a long-standing RFP with these people on hold. Like, we have all kinds of contracts that come through here that say up to an amount. We have a contracted speech language pathologist RFP for backup services. When we have somebody who gets sick, goes on vacation, whatever it is, because we don't have staff to cover that, contract could be up to $30,000 for the year or something. And then if somebody gets into a situation where it's like a 9-month deal, well, we can come in here pretty quickly, I think in a month's time, get an amendment put together on the PSC amendment list and say, well, we're going to need the services a lot longer. I feel like that would go through all of the RFP process. You'd have all the boxes checked. We would have compared all the speech language pathologist providers all over the state instead of this quick knee-jerk type situation, particularly since we had this very situation, not this, but very similar situation just last year, we need to maybe be thinking about those kind of contingency plans and being able to still check all the legal boxes. Thank you.
Senator Southworth, if I could respond to that, and we have done an RFP for hands-on therapy. That RFP was for the Kentucky School for the Deaf. So when the need arose at KSB, then we did not have that RFP was written specifically for KSD. So that is the reason that we went the not practical to bid, was to get the services, because we weren't aware the speech path was going to leave. With the maternity leave, we had some time to plan, but this person left and we weren't aware that she was going to leave. So we tried to think outside the box a little bit to try to get the services there so the kids could keep moving. So we have done an RFP in the past, yes.
Okay, well, thank you. That did help answer some of my question that I had earlier. But obviously, thinking outside the box, I'm all about it. But usually in public service, there's a box you do have to stay in. So perhaps now that we've been through this, we can all prepare for the future and when we have everything funneling into one person and one person can let us down, we do need to have contingency plans. Perhaps we have a contingency plan now.
Co-Chair Cook, you have a question, comment?
Comment and then a motion. Just with Karen's explanation there about already having the RFP process in at one place and then having to quickly adapt and pull it in the other place, I find that a pretty logical and common sense explanation of why that happened. Therefore, I move to approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second? Is that Senator Yates? Were you the second? All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Minter. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to number 772 on the routine MOA pink list. And I pulled this contract as well. Really, nothing against Caldwell County. Great bunch of folks. Got a lot of friends in Caldwell County, but it's just representative of these series of contracts we have here. And I thought just best pull one and let you explain it, then didn't have to pull all of them. But we're talking about federal funds, $230,000, provide funds as sub-grants to local school districts to assist them and their participating partners in developing and implementing a comprehensive and integrated literacy plan from birth through grade 12. And my first question is this consistent and aligned with Senate Bill 9, which we passed this last session?
So we have Mickey Ray with us virtually that could answer that question. I'll defer to her.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, it would be in line with Senate Bill 9. Senate Bill 9 specifically starts providing support at K through 5 and K through 3 within the legislation. And so the grant would support the local districts in determining how they would like to use the 16% of the funding that they are receiving. And for Caldwell County specifically, based on their local decision, they are utilizing those funds as it is established in the contract for some of the preschool supports. And Dana, you may want to speak specifically to how Caldwell County is utilizing those funds.
Yes, absolutely.
And Dana, you are muted.
Thank you. I clicked it. It just did not go off. Good morning. All of our districts in the Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy Grant are focused on literacy birth through grade 12, but they collaborate with other state agencies such as Head Start, Save the Children, Governor's Office of Early Childhood, HANDS. And what they do is they promote literacy, and they can use the funds from the grant to promote literacy within their district and collaborate with those other agencies in Kentucky. They have purchased the TELD for oral language screening for the birth to age 5. They look at 4-year-olds oral language to try to make sure teachers understand where their 4-year-olds are and how they can support them increasing that oral language, because we know that that will help to lay a better foundation for reading for those kiddos. They provide literacy kits for the families. They provide the matching funds for Imagination Library. They do baby showers for the districts, for Caldwell specifically, to provide information for parents about how important it is to read to children and talk to children, and provide books for them to use with their families. They also provide materials for the families to use to increase phonemic awareness, letter identification, alphabet sounds, those type things in that birth to age 5 range.
So Senator Mayor, just to add on to that, the bill, Senate Bill 9, requires that screening component. It requires the read at home plans and supports for parents and families, and that instruction around decoding and phonemic awareness and phonics that Dana has mentioned.
But to be eligible for these funds, each school district must make an application. Is that correct?
Yes,
And
that's correct.
You mentioned contract earlier. Can you give me some of the specifics of the contract? I'm assuming there's some expectations in return for being awarding these grants. So,
absolutely, they have to work with birth. They have to have a plan set in place to increase literacy effectiveness in their teachers, and to increase and to get a plan. So they have to all create a literacy plan that outlines how they're going to be spending the funds to support literacy. But this grant foremost is a professional learning grant, and it is for professional learning for all teachers, not just teachers of reading, but all teachers in the school, to implement literacy strategies to make our students stronger at reading and writing.
but why wouldn't every school district apply for one of these grants?
I can't answer that question. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to that. My thought would be that people would want, that everybody would. So it does require quite a bit of professional learning. We used implementation science when designing this, and implementation science says that one and done professional learning is not effective in changing teacher practice, that it takes extensive professional learning over an extended period of time to actually change teacher practice. And that's what this grant is built around. So it does require a lot of professional learning, and it offers the funds to support that, and to also support the implementation of what the teachers have learned.
If there's an application process, who determines who gets a grant? I mean, by virtue of application, are you awarded the grant?
No, it goes through the normal process at KDE, where we have people that are outside that are trained to score those, and then the highest scores are awarded the grant.
At KDE, we utilize what we call the RFA process. We try to mirror the RFP process as closely as we can, and we've created this so that school districts can apply for competitive grants that we receive either through from the General Assembly or from federal grants. So we use what we call the RFA, Request for Application. My division works with the program office to create the application. There's a scoring rubric that's included. There's of course, budget information that needs to be included. And then subject matter experts are the scoring team, and they review those applications. And then based on the award amount, how much money we have to grant, then the awardees are scored and awarded. And the result is an MOA contract.
Well, I'll go back to Senate Bill 9 again. You know, I thought part of the intent of passing this particular legislation was to kind of level the playing field for all of our school systems, we seem to have a very fragmented approach to teaching literacy. And this was supposed to consolidate all those functions and come up with demonstrated best practices for every school system they would be eligible to. But that's not the case.
Senator Meredith, I would say that this Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy Grant, so this is in year 3. So it has been an opportunity for districts across our state prior to the passing of Senate Bill 9, prior to that becoming effective in law. So we are now providing opportunities for people to apply for this federal grant, but also the Read to Achieve grant, which is part of Senate Bill 9. That is in place. Obviously, that's utilizing the state funds. And then we have taken steps to further provide cohesion around that related to the Read to Succeed part of Senate Bill 9, where there is that statewide opportunities for professional learning. So really, I see that as being an effective measure because now more schools and districts can participate statewide, whereas if we did not have Senate Bill 9, there are just those 2 isolated grant opportunities.
I guess I'm disturbed by the process in that, school systems are in competition for each other for these very limited dollars. The schools that aren't awarded the grants, how are their needs being met?
I think the professional learning component.
Sorry, I think you're freezing up on us.
And schools and districts do have different options for those professional learning mechanisms that are embedded in each of the grants.
Well, again, it kind of addresses my concern. It looks like we've got a lot of different paths to try to accomplish one central goal. And rather than be centralized in our thinking and our philosophy to address this issue, this is a little bit problematic for me. But let me ponder on it. Senator Douglas, you have a question, comment regarding this?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. If I may, I'll ask them sequentially, and I'm sure our panel can answer them. My first question is this: I'm concerned with our schools, or at least the teaching in our schools, becoming more and more fragmented. There is a literacy plan that's established and submitted, and then an application is accepted and funds are awarded. Is there any follow-up on the backside, any targets that you have to hit in order to reapply for those grants? That's question number 1. My question number 2 is a concern that I continually have. Again, I talk about having been involved with teachers for 38 years. My concern is, and this may seem like a silly question, but do colleges ever talk to our teaching profession? Because we're always coming in behind supposedly what our teachers are taught in post-secondary education and supplementing. So my question is there any conversation between our governing bodies in education and our colleges? And I'll let you answer those questions, please.
I'm going to ask Dana to speak to the monitoring piece, your first question, but to address the second question, we are fortunately having extensive conversations with educator prep programs related to Senate Bill 9. There's a section that requires that we align the instruction for pre-service teacher candidates around those essential components of reading.
I apologize for interrupting. The problem didn't start with Senate Bill 9. We've had issues with education for a long time. So I'm not really relating this to Senate Bill 9. We seem to continually come back and talk about our education system, whether it is people who are teaching in the education system, or whether it is the legislative body, the General Assembly, or whether it is parents. We're trying to find a way to make our education system more efficient in terms of educating our kids. My question is, how much conversation is being had between those who are in the field and those who are teaching the people in the field? Because it seems to me at some point, someone in the field would say, it's not cutting it. What we're getting in our colleges is not cutting it. Or perhaps someone who is teaching or in colleges would say, or ask the question, how are we doing? How are we helping you people who are in the field? Are we doing our job? And if not, can we have some follow-up on what we need to change in terms of how we produce our product, that is our teachers, so that we can best serve you? That's my question. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
So to address that, I would say there is the mandated training that was connected to Senate Bill 175 2019, where educator prep programs go through that required training each year around the Kentucky academic standards. We also bring them in around the model curriculum framework, and then they're currently participating in partnership with the pilot program that we have going on around designing high quality professional curriculum, as well as we have representatives from universities who are going through the statewide professional learning program under the Kentucky Reading Academy. So we have created partnerships there as well.
Senator, anything else?
No, nothing else, Mr. Chair.
All right, Senator Southworth.
Mr. Chairman, I really was just going to try to call out my concern actually during our Senate Bill 9 discussions last year, since we're on that topic. The grant funding I actually started to dig into and realized, like everything around here, it's a big can of worms and they all start crawling out. You don't have time in the rest of the session to finish it. I'm quite concerned that grants in education aren't constitutional. And I know this is a little outside the scope of, this one particular grant, because we don't have all of them on the table in front of us, but the General Assembly is the one that creates a funding piece, and then it turns into this grant program. We need to really be thinking about how to get all of our kids reading and not having these one-off grants, I think, to make sure we actually have what I'd call a system of common schools that aligns to what the courts have said, that we need to all be providing this across the state. Thank you.
Senator Yates, you have a question, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think sometimes we can get off a little bit of a tangent because so many of our senators elected have concern about the literacy of our children throughout the Commonwealth. Me, for one, I think that we got to constantly be looking at best practices, and I do agree that obviously through the history of Kentucky we've fallen behind in many ways, and that's for a number of factors. But I do think that these particular grants, continuing education in different areas, looks at best practices, what works where, in that local control. I was talking to one of my colleagues just recently, and I think that's very, very important so that we continue to implement that. But we know that trying to put the same thing across all of Kentucky in very, very different districts that we all represent, with different situations, even in schools, we have to be able to really micro-tailor that. So I think these particular grants help. In fact, it helps us find what are the best practices so that we can improve that education. And as far as requiring that continued education of our teachers, I think that's always going to be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Senator Yates, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Minter. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to numbers 64 through 67 on our MOA for $50,000 and under gray list. Again, I request that these contracts be pulled. You make reference to the agreement type is called Calming Space Round 1. And we're going to provide funds to implement a calming space to support self-management strategies for all students. It's in essence what it is. So can you explain this program? And when you talk about round one, is there going to be a round two, round three, round four? What's happening here?
There will be 2 rounds, but first, good morning, members of the Government Contract Review Committee, Senator Chairman Meredith. Always a pleasure to be here to discuss and engage in conversations with you all about programs, initiatives, and partnerships we have at KDE to uplift our students and improve instruction for both students and staff here. And also, I want to say a big thanks to the Kentucky General Assembly and members of this committee here for making student mental health a priority. I did leave you with a recent article. More Kentucky youth are struggling with mental health. Our state lawmakers doing enough? And I think this is an example of our lawmakers being committed to providing a multitude of services to meet the various needs of students' mental health. And the common rooms are just one example of a mechanism we're using to meet the needs of students' mental health and helping students to de-escalate from crisis situations they're experiencing in school.
That's in theory. Now, can you kind of give me practical application how this works?
For example, as it is articulated in the memo to you all, say a student is having a mental health crisis, and we can...
Excuse me, but who determines that they're having a mental health crisis? There's got to be a triage system here.
Well, absolutely. There's a teacher in the classroom. There's a school counselor. It's everyone. There's a school principal, support staff, and other administrators. And then we're also at a point here in Kentucky where students are feeling comfortable because, again, our goal is to ensure that each student in Kentucky has at least one adult that he or she can report to if they're having a crisis or something of that nature. And so the student is identified, and more than likely it's with our school counselors, not always, who are trained mental health specialists. And again, I want to thank the General Assembly for passing a bill, making a law that we will have more mental health specialists in schools, as well as allowing students to have more days for mental health. And so the student is experiencing a crisis in the classroom, in school, either coming to school or in school. These common rooms will allow students to go in and de-escalate with a staff member. What's special about Kentucky and some other states, that you'll have trained staff members who are able to listen to the students and help them de-escalate and get them back into the classroom with the involvement of their parents.
Okay, I hate to be so elementary about it, but again, you got a student who's acting up in the classroom.
Yeah.
Teacher does what?
Yeah, we're not necessarily saying the student is acting up. The student could come to school with a crisis or with an issue. So this is not punitive. This is not about Thomas Tucker coming to class and acting up. This is the rooms are not for that purpose.
But you have a designated calming room. Is that correct?
Calming room or calming space. That is correct.
So who determines if the student is going to be placed in the calming?
Yeah. Could be
room?
The staff member. The student, again, we want students to advocate for themselves. Could have a student who's saying, I need some space. I've had a critical experience last night or the last couple of days. I need to talk with a staff member about the issues and problems that we're having.
So are you saying this is student initiated?
It could be. Again, we want students to begin to advocate for themselves, but we have, again, trained staff who can recognize the triggers in students, who can recognize the behavior in students. So it's not just one person, as you said earlier. It's not one staff member in schools. A multitude of staff members should be able to recognize these triggers in students.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess I'm concerned a little bit about parental involvement. If a child goes to the calming room, is the parent notified?
Yeah, the parent is notified, and on some of these occasions, we're encouraging parents to be a critical part a critical spoke in this wheel of addressing the mental health of all of our students. It's a comprehensive approach. Lawmakers can't do it alone. Thank you for supporting student mental health. Certainly want to, whether it's you all, members of the General Assembly, the Government Contract Review Committee, our governor or lieutenant governor, or our commissioner, it takes everyone to help address the 130,000 students, folks, who have reported depression and anxiety in Kentucky alone.
But you know, I think we're creating an environment where unless you have a mental health issue, you're not normal. You know, when you talk about that many people suffering from some type of mental health crisis, I would challenge the data. Because, you know, life's tough. Always has been, always will be. And if we don't allow kids just to understand that you've got to adapt and accept it without the stigma associated with having a mental health issue, you know, that in itself kind of becomes a cry for attention. Also becomes you fit in because you've got a mental health crisis. It's a way of getting attention, and it gets exaggerated.
Or I would add, Senator Meredith, a traumatic experience, because it's not totally about a mental health crisis. Could be a student who is experiencing some mental health crisis. Could be the death of a parent, the death of a loved one, the death of a student. And so this will allow us to address the need to help the student de-escalate before, as you called it, before it becomes a behavioral problem. And our job is to support our students and keep them in school. We know students do best when they're in school and they're cared for by committed and compassionate adults in Kentucky's 171 school districts.
Well, are you concerned about the stigma associated with, you know, Johnny just got sent to the comm room, or Johnny's in the comm room. Johnny's got a mental health issue. Is that really in the best interest of the student to be singled out that way?
Well, I would, if we do that, but again, our folks here in Kentucky are not about the business of creating psychologically unsafe places. Our goal is to create calming rooms where it is safe for students and staff. Again, they're working one-on-one with staff, and to destigmatize students who, or staff members who are dealing with mental health issues or experiencing some type of traumatic event.
Well, isn't that kind of counterintuitive to that, though? If you're trying to destigmatize it, if you've got a designated room and you see a student going towards it, doesn't that kind of stigmatize them?
No, absolutely not. The point I'm making is to destigmatize mental health issues, to destigmatize students and staff who are experiencing traumatic issues, and to make it more acceptable. And I think we're doing a great job here in Kentucky, making it more acceptable for us to help students and staff members, in this case here, students, address these issues. Our goal is, again, to destigmatize it, as opposed to, as you just mentioned, making it appear that a student is in trouble, that the student is having, you know, some type of crisis and should be ashamed about what's happening at home or what's happening in school, or in general, what's happening in his or her life.
Senator Yates, you have a question, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one hits pretty personal. Right now, I have two young, teenage daughters in public education, and I love to talk to them to look at the difference because the way that they handle these issues compared to what as I'd grown up and other members here, there's a different level of empathy and understanding amongst our students, and I think that has been done by making sure that they're exposed and understand that mental health issues are very similar to other type of issues or sicknesses that other people may go through. Sometimes they're temporary, sometimes they're permanent, sometimes they're just psychological, sometimes they have to do with just the overall health of the student. But I think reducing that stigma that when a child needs help, that there's something wrong with that is something that's very, very important. And I think that we're working that, at least in my school districts, and I'm seeing that firsthand, is they'll come home and say, you know, so-and-so is going through this, their family went through a divorce, their mother is suffering from cancer or whatnot. That is, mental health is not a new thing. It is something that society, particularly in Kentucky, we've been behind. We've left unaddressed for a long time. We see a lot of people who went through school without them. We've seen the horrific results of not addressing that. We've also seen as an adults that when it's not treated as when they're young, a lot of times they have trouble becoming part of society. You see dual diagnosis where we go into drug addiction, where people try to self-diagnose. So the fact that we're trying to get that into the school early on is really important. I lost a very close relative after his second day of high school to suicide. And I look back and think, maybe had we been a little more empathetic and understanding, not only within my family, but that understanding, things would have been very different. And so I commend the work that you're doing, because you are saving lives. There's a saying in nonprofit area that you'll always have some greedy with the needy. And I think even in this, you're going to have some kids that maybe try to take advantage of that situation, of course. I was the kid that went down the locker room about once a day to get a break. I get that, but you sometimes making sure they have what they need is particularly important. Also for the rest of the classroom. But I think that we're looking for best practices. We know that this has worked other places. And you talked about making sure that the family's involved. You know, as a mentor, a youth mentor, a lot of times there's not a parent to call. There's no one that cares, or there's no one that'll pick up the phone to show up down in the school district when they need that help. But that one-on-one with that counselor, that one-on-one with somebody who cares, lets a child know there's someone who gives a damn. And sometimes that's the difference between them being successful or going down the wrong path. And what we've done is we've failed to address this. We talk about our criminal justice system. We know that if we don't address by age 13, the chances get harder and harder and harder. So implementing this early on, I think, will benefit so many parts of Kentucky. So thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to make this brief. Having come from a family of 16 kids in a really, really rural area of Western Kentucky, having grown up in a school system where, in essence, 95% of the Black Americans in my school were my brothers and sisters, I understand feeling isolated. One of the things that struck me was when you said students do their best when they're kept in school in a calm situation. That should have scared the dickens out of everybody in this room, everybody in the Commonwealth, and everybody in our country. Students do best when we keep them in school. I get it, Representative Yates, because I lived it. Not my kids. I lived it. My concern is, how long do the federal funds last? And when they stop, who picks up the tab? I think they're wonderful programs. But the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky are concerned that we're not looking at our Kentucky Constitution, and we're not following the demands of our Kentucky Constitution. Everything we talk about up here on this committee, our Constitution, should be what we look at. I'm concerned that sometimes we're not really saving more kids. A comment was made, we're saving more kids. We don't know that because we don't have the data. And I don't know that we're saving more kids or if we're making them more vulnerable. Something that Senator Meredith had been alluding to. I'm concerned that we use the word crisis too easily. I'm an anesthesiologist. I get the word crisis, trust me, I do. And I'm concerned that we use the word crisis far too often. And if nothing else, to make it more emotional. These are our kids. We want to educate our kids. We want our kids to be safe. We don't want them to be scared. And I fear that far too often we are scaring our kids with some of the words that we use. I'm also concerned that we're doing a lot of treatment shifting. We asked the question, crisis. Was the crisis elicited at home or at the school? And when we tend to treat things at school that are happening that are initiated at home, nothing changes at home. And our teachers, and I'll always say I love my teachers. I do. I support my teachers. But there's only so much they can do in a teaching situation. And I'm concerned that we're shifting the social burden to our teachers. And the teachers that I talk with feel the same way. And again, I'm not talking about what I've observed. I'm talking about what I lived. These programs are tough for me because I want our kids to be successful. But we keep creating more and more and more and more and more and more of these programs. Why do we have to create more and more and more? Because we're not addressing the primary issue. And as legislators, we want to do that. We want to do that. But we need our education system to be truthful to us so that we know which the heck direction to go in. We need that. We've got bankers, we've got farmers, we've got physicians. We've got all kinds of people in the legislature. We're not professionals in every area, but we need our professionals, our teachers, our superintendents, our principals, our leaders in education to be truthful with us so we know what to do. Because again, if we continue to expand all these programs, we can't be addressing the issue, because if we did, we wouldn't have to keep expanding these programs. So I guess this is not a question, but it is a plea. It is a plea from my heart. Help us. Work with us. Instead of always asking for more money and more programs, talk to us. Help us to understand better what is going on so we can start decreasing the numbers and not increasing the numbers. That's my plea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Co-Chair Cook.
Thank you, Chairman Meredith. You know, Senator Douglas, 99% of the places I go, I usually come from the largest family. I'm one of 10 kids, so gotta come around you to be around one of 16. So, but I bet you and we always had to grow up sharing a room, and there was no place, there was no private place growing up. You were always in there. And I went from being one of 10 kids, and then the Marine Corps, and I can promise you there was no calming place in that as well. But I see the need for this, and I understand this. Senator Yates, I too have a 16-year-old daughter, and it's different. My wife and I have this conversation all the time, and as I try to relate to her and talk to her about the kids in class and everything that's going on. And I was lucky because I would come home and I had a dog, and I think the family dog or the horse probably knows more secrets than it should ever be, and that was my calming place, and that was where I could go and tell my secrets. But when I go and visit these schools today, so many of these kids don't have that. They don't have that home environment, especially maybe the urban kids, or maybe it's a rural kid and they're being raised by their grandparents or an aunt or an uncle, and God knows where the parents, the biological parents are, and they come from these tough situations. And so you got the educators. I mean, sometimes these kids are coming to school and they're rushing. First thing they're doing is going straight to the cafeteria so they can eat breakfast. And let me tell you, that's more the norm than it is the unusual. I think 25 years ago when I was in high school, maybe that it was the opposite, and just a few kids were going there. But now you got kids who can't even stay awake in first hour because they just went to the cafeteria and they stuffed themselves because they hadn't had anything to eat since they left school yesterday. I mean, I know in Bourbon County we packed 600 backpacks for the backpack program last Wednesday. 600 in just little old Bourbon County. So you have to have. And I understand the calming place. And if you even told me that you were getting a dog in there, that so a kid could go in and read a dog or anything like that, I would understand and I would get that, especially for elementary school and especially for middle school. But here's my one concern as we move forward with this. And I don't know the answer, and probably nobody knows the answer. But if you're a senior in high school and you're being provided that out, like how are we helping to transition them as they come through high school? Because next year they're going to come out and they're going to be working on my farm. They're going to be going to college, they're going to the military, okay? And that safe space, that calming place is going to disappear for them. And it's going to be like having the rug jerked out from underneath them. So how do we create it? and I'm all about the creation. Like I said, I would do anything to help this. I go in, I talk to kids, I mentor kids. I'm all in on this. I get it. How do we transition to them to understand that when you hit the real world, when you turn 18, we're jerking that rug out, and there's going to be no commonplace. I don't get a commonplace when I come up to Frankfurt and the annex is full, and whether you got the teachers filling the hallways or whatever. There's no safe commonplace for us, and God knows we all wish there would be sometimes because we need it. But how do we transition? How do we make that transition from the commonplace to the real world?
And I'll speak briefly to that. Thank you for articulating that so well. A couple months ago, you all heard from the Commission of Student Advisory Committee and members of the Student Voice Team here in Kentucky. Beautiful, articulate students who really represent the best in American public education, American education. And what they said, to your point, Representative Cook, was this: we have to start early. We have to, because once our seniors graduate, they won't have that soft landing spot or guaranteed to have someone in their occupation or in college that's going to meet their needs. So they said very clearly right here, I think maybe in this room or wherever the Interim Joint Committee meets, and they said we have to start this early, and this is an opportunity for us to begin this work early.
Dr. Tucker, may I step in and just say a few words?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. To the senators that just spoke, emotional regulation has been proven to be one of life's, one of the best predictors for our post-secondary success. So whether you're going onto a farm, whether you're going into a business, whether you're going to the military, we should all know emotional regulation skills. Emotional regulation and coping skills, that's a requirement of this calming grant. So teaching students those specific skills is a requirement. Also required is teaching proper use of these calming spaces. So that's going to be important for you to know. As Dr. Tucker mentioned, another requirement of this grant is for family engagement and community engagement. So making sure our families and community are involved. We talk a little bit about Kentucky. Kentucky ranks 37th in overall youth well-being, 37th. So we have to do something. We talk about data. Nationally, I think we can all agree that the CDC is a really strong evidence-based organization. They say suspected attempted suicides increased by 31% among adolescents in 2020, 51% higher in 2021 compared to 2019 among girls ages 12 to 17. So we do have a crisis. We have a mental health crisis. And I love that Senator Meredith believes that we should destigmatize mental health and bring these mental health issues out into the light. More of our youth are actually talking about this. They are pleading with us and you as lawmakers and saying that we need to do more about mental health. So these calming spaces are a wonderful way to approach this. Think about the floods in Eastern Kentucky. Think about the tornado in Western Kentucky. How are we supporting students who are in crisis, right? This is just one option. I want to tell you one other thing. The General Assembly, as Dr. Tucker mentioned, did a great job. You yourself said, we recognize that all schools must provide a place for students to feel safe and supported to learn throughout the school day, and that any trauma a student may have experienced can have a significant impact on the ability of a student to learn. Our calming spaces are one wonderful solution that is evidence-based to this issue that you have addressed.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I'll throw out a couple of statistics, though, that trouble me greatly. And I heard this a couple of years ago in a committee meeting from 3 physicians from the University of Kentucky. And the first being that in 1900, the human brain was fully developed at 18 years of age. Today, it's 25 plus, which tells me we're not allowing kids to grow up. We don't recognize the resiliency of the human spirit and what people are capable of doing when they do face adversity. And I don't have any problem with the calming room, but I do have a problem with how far are we taking this, that kids are going to be totally shielded from adversity, and that's where you learn your greatest lessons in life. The second statistic, I asked the physicians, we were talking about teenage suicide. The alarming rate has increased. We certainly acknowledge that. And I asked them, and it was not a leading question, is there any particular group of students that you can do by socioeconomic strata that has a higher probability of suicide than others? And I could tell one of the physicians who answered really struggled with the answer. For the longest time, he's thought about it. He says, well, no, there's not. It's pretty much solid across the board, except there is one small percentage of students who have a lower probability of suicide, and that's students who have some degree of religiosity. Now, that's where he struggled, was finding the word religiosity, which means that they have some belief in a higher being. If that is statistically relevant, which I think that it is, then why don't we focus on that as well? We can't. We want to look at other avenues ahead of us. But again, we're not allowing children to grow up. We're shielding them from adversity. And then when they get out in the real world, as Co-Chairman Cook mentioned, they don't know how to function. You know, I grew up in a time where we had to deal with the Korean War, the Vietnam War, assassination of John F. Kennedy, assassination of Robert Luther King, assassination of Robert Kennedy, violence and civil rights, burning Los Angeles and Detroit, and we dealt with the Cold War. We actually had drills where you had to hide underneath the desk and to prepare for a bomb hitting you. I would venture to say that in my generation, we face as many adverse events as children do today, but we learn to adapt and be able to function in society. And that's my concern. I know we belabored this too long already, but it concerns me that we're taking this to extreme. The testimony that you're talking about, those articulate young people who testified this summer, we gave 2 days of mental health excuse absence. They want 6. Really? To go back to Senator Douglas' point, they need to be in the classroom. Because you being home, sitting in your basement, contemplating what's going to happen next, it's not a mental health solution for us. So, again, I belabored this thing too long, but it's very, very disturbing. And I don't think we have a really comprehensive plan how to address not only the mental health issues the students actually face, but how we let them grow up and function in an adult world. Senator Southworth, if you have a comment, this will be the last one. We'll move on.
I actually had 2 questions. One, we were talking about that they were going to, when they go to this calming space, there's a staff member that can work with them one-on-one. One of my concerns has been that we don't have enough one-on-one interaction in schools, and it seems like to me when guidance counselors are assigned to 600 kids apiece or something, how are we making sure that all the kids that blow into the calming space are going to have enough staff for this?
It will be a multitude of staff, not all school counselors, where we are working hard, and again, through your support and your vote in creating a law for us to hire additional mental health folks. So it won't be all of our school counselors. It will be a multitude of staff, different staff members, and staff members trained. And I'll ask Dr. Sweeney to briefly speak on that, please.
Yes, Senator Southworth, hello again. So again, the Senate has created a bill, the Safety and Resiliency Act, which suggests that school counselors should have a school counselor to student ratio of 250 to 1. But as you know, it's a should and not a shall. And so we would love your support in backing that bill with a should. With a shall rather, and requiring more school counselors in our state. We know that it is efficacious. It is evidence-based. There's so much evidence to suggest that school counselors support the whole child, whether it's academic development, social and emotional development, or college and career development. So we would love that support. As Dr. Tucker mentioned, many of the skills that are being taught for these calming spaces are coping skills, emotional regulation skills, and self-management skills. So if I need a minute as an adult, and we all do at times, we all need to take a walk at times, don't we? If we need a moment, right, we should be able to do that. We should be able to identify when we are escalated. And why would we not do the same why would we not teach our students to do the same?
Let me pop in here. That goes to the second question I had, which was this is $10,000 for a whole board of education, and they're going to have multiple schools for every district. So I'm trying to piece this out to find out what can we afford with $10,000. So we like buying a sofa with 2 pillows on it, like for 6 schools at Goodwill, or how are we doing this?
No, actually, the breakdown of cost is in the contract in front of you. So you can take a look at that. And there's a requirement for a sustainability plan. So after this year, each school district is required to explain how they plan to maintain this.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Well, let's bring me to my final point in conclusion. Again, this is 100% federal funding. Right now, we're running a $31 trillion debt in this nation. We don't spend our dollars wisely. And I'm not sure how future generations are going to deal with the fact that our economy is collapsing. And if we see a depression like we saw in the 20s and 30s, we're not going to have enough calming space for anybody. But with that great discussion, I appreciate it. Is there a motion to approve these contracts? So there's a motion by Senator Yates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
No.
Senator Southworth,
Split my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Most certainly.
I'm not against having a better place to go than the principal's office when you need to talk to somebody or when you need to de-escalate, because I think that we need to have more one-on-one interaction. But what's mostly concerning me here, why I'm going to vote no, is we've got $10,000 on round 1. I just heard that in order to implement this right, we're going to need to pass another bill next year, and we've got round 2, and so far I don't see, I mean, this to me is a multi-million-dollar project. If we're talking what we're talked about today, this contract does not represent what we've talked about, and I don't think we're getting a whole lot out of it as is. So I think I'm going to vote no now, and if we bring back a $5 million project to redo all the schools with a bunch of cool spaces, then that's going to be the conversation that we've had. But as it stands, this just really brings up more questions than answers, and I think we're taking a step in without having a very good comprehensive plan.
Senator Yates,
Yes, please.
We've asked you to tell us what you need. We know there's a problem. We're all elected officials and we have our own areas of expertise. You've brought the very best experts in and had that direction, and you're saying these small incremental pieces all put together make up the greater whole to help put us in the right direction. And our children should be our top priority. I'm a yes vote.
Representative Bowling,
I'm going to vote yes today. It's been a good conversation. I think more conversation needs to take place to make sure we're approaching this the most comprehensive way we can be, and that we get everybody on the same page. But I'm going to vote yes today to move forward. Thank you.
Representative Hart,
No.
Representative Minter, Representative Cook,
Explain my vote.
Yes, please.
I'm going to vote yes today. I'm voting yes because I've been in the schools, I've seen it, and sometimes you need a space. We need a space because that one kid in there that is having that bad day that doesn't, maybe they're not being so bad that you go to the principal office, but they're being bad enough they're disrupting the whole class, and we have to find some kind of way to get them back in line so they can be in class, and the teacher ends up focusing on that one kid instead of focusing on the whole classroom. And I think there's definitely a use for these calming places. I just looked over a list of materials going to be in there. I have a lot of questions about that and what they're going to look like between elementary school, middle school. And then I have very, very grave concerns on how we make that transition from, okay, you're approaching 18, you're getting ready to be an adult. You're going to lose your common space. How are you going to function? So I have a lot of questions about how we're going to do that transition, and I would like to see more on that and how the legislature can help make that effective, to know that you're not going to get a, hold on a second, let's stop this once you turn 18, that's not going to exist anymore. So I vote yes today.
Chairman Meredith,
No. The vote total? 4-0, 3 yes. Is there a motion to disapprove the contracts? If not, then they will go to finance for the final determination. I need to clarify some business here. We started this discussion with a motion to defer several items. And because they're on two different lists, I need two different motions. We had the 56 on the routine MOA pink list, which the motion that we made is acceptable for that, but I need a separate motion for 120 and 121 on the MOA Amendment 10 list to defer. Motion Representative Hart, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. And folks, appreciate you joining us this morning and participating in this discussion. It's always worthwhile for all of us, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Next item's on the pool list are with the Board of Education, and is number 4 on the routine MOA pink list and number 15 on the MOA for 50,000 gray list. If representatives are here, please come forward. Excuse me, Board of Elections. My fault. They are here. Thank you for joining us again. You've been here so frequently this summer that if you would, you know the routine. Please identify yourself for the record and feel free to proceed.
Karen Sellers, Executive Director of the State Board of Elections.
Morning, Taylor Brown, General Counsel.
Senator Southworth has questions.
Thank you. I hoped that if you guys were 5th on the agenda, you would have been up close to the front, but apparently not. My question is on both Whitley County and Garrett County. Are these counties, were they previously using the eSlate, eScan? They have the eSlates and these are now the Verity systems, or are these additional machines on the current system they're already using?
No, they are replacing the Verities with the Verities replace the eSlate and eScan.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Approve. Second.
Motion by Senator Bowling, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. And this was just on number 15, Senator Southworth. Is that correct?
4.
Well,
excuse me, number 4.
My question kind of went to both, but I understand you'll need to make the motion separately. So
Yeah, we'll need to make the motion separately. So this motion is for number 4, Senator Bowling, just for clarification. Yes. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
split my vote.
Yes.
I'm voting aye because I want to get rid of the e-slates. This is in no way an endorsement of the Verity. I think everybody knows that. But that is, I know a lot of these counties are trying to get there, and we've required them to do that. So at least there's some level of paper to be seen in this. Thank you.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Now is there a motion for number 15 on the MOA for 50,000 and under gray list? Motion by Representative Hart, second by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the pull list with Department of Local Government is number 45 on the routine MOA pink list.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, to the committee. My name's Aaron Jones, branch manager of the Office of State Grants with the Department for Local Government.
Appreciate you joining us this morning. It says, I have questions about my correction. I'm reading my script wrong. Senator Southworth has questions regarding this.
Thank you. I noticed the Department for Local Government and most of these projects uses local government economic development funds, and in some cases there are federal funds, and here we're talking about general funds. And I wanted to find out if you could explain to us what these general funds are and what the differences are between some people's projects. I'm a little struggling and didn't really see any clarity in the contract either.
Okay, well, for this specific project, which some may call a line item, this is a general fund appropriation that was included in the House Bill 1 budget bill, and it is identified as a community development project. This was a one-time allocation for the 2022-2024 fiscal biennium. And I'll read this specifically, and the reason I'm reading this is because there was approximately 40 of these line items that were given to DLG to administer. So I don't have all these memorized, but this one specifically says $1,400,000 in fiscal year 2022 to 2023 to the city of Williamsburg for renovation and expansion of the Kentucky Splash Water Park and Campground.
Thank you for that explanation. That answers my entire question.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Motion approved by Co-Chair Cook. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Douglas. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes because it is in our budget. It's one of those things that you don't really love about our budget. I feel like it's not really the state government budget job to determine that City of Williamsburg is going to get $1.4 million for a splash park. I would really prefer that we be a little bit more state focused and not like that in our budget, but it is what it is, so that's why I'm voting yes today.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Minter. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item on the pull list are with Transportation, Office and the Secretary. Excuse me. Got ahead of myself. Next item on the pull list is with Department of Public Health. And our number is 46, 47, 48 on the routine MOA pink list. If representatives from the Department of Health are with us, please identify yourself for the record. Is your mic on?
Right. Chairman, I'm Astrid Masterson with the Office of Administrative Services. May we request for number 48, Project Ricochet, to go first in Public Health Group?
Yeah, most certainly.
Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Vivian and Andrew.
I don't know.
She's
I'm
a little bit
gonna
under
change my
the
mind
weather,
here.
so that's
Motion to adjourn.
I'm going to do my best. Wow.
You always do, bless your heart. So have at it. Yeah, you need some water or something stronger?
I like the way you think. Thank you. I'll do my best. Vivian Lastly Bibbs, Office of Health Equity, Department for Public Health.
Andrew Young, Director of Administration of Financial Management, Public Health.
Excuse me, but is your mic on? I'm not sure that it is green light on. Both there.
Push that. Yep.
I'm sorry, Andrew Young, Director of Administration and Financial Management, Public Health.
All right, thank you. Senator Southworth has questions regarding 48.
Thank you. Hopefully, I can direct my questions to him because I don't want you to have to keep talking. My question really is around it says federal funds, and I'm trying to get to, a better understanding of exactly what we're doing. It sounds to me kind of like the same thing that I go to that aren't government run, that are, neighborhood group meetings, that kind of stuff, trying to move things around the community. And I'm just trying to get to the bottom of exactly how and when we decide that the government agency needs to organize community meetings versus communities organizing their own meetings. Very kind of pick and choosy here.
I mean, answer I can.
Sure, please.
Okay. The Project Ricochet, to me, was in a very unique position. They have a great in-reach into communities that we don't. So we're trying to get that community conversation going around health and wellness, teaching communities to be advocates for their own health, to be mindful of information that comes their way. How do they best receive it? What's the best way to give it? If access and transportation is an issue, we can provide that. And Project Ricochet was in a position to do that. They're reaching the faith-based community, which we really didn't have our finger on. I don't have to tell you that a lot of communities look to their pastors and their religious entities for information. They're trusted messengers within the community. So that's why Project Ricochet came to us and said, we can help you expand your reach. We can touch these communities, and here are the multiple ways we're going to do that.
And the federal funds, is this like a grant program to get out in the community, or what's the nature of that?
So the CDC Health Equity Grant funds that we received was to give out community grants to address comorbidities and other health disparities within those underrepresented, vulnerable minority communities. So our community grants are set up to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this contract? If not, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Senator Yates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Hart. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the row.
Senator Douglas,
Pass.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling,
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Then we'll proceed to number 46 and 47. Thank you. You recover quickly.
Thank you.
Please note we have a doctor on our committee, so he hasn't been credentialed, but he is a doctor. Please identify yourself for the record and feel free to proceed. Senator Southworth has questions.
Emily Meserly, Immunization Branch Manager, Kentucky Department for Public Health.
And Andrew Young, Director of Administration, Financial Management, Public Health.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, are we on 46?
46, yes.
Okay. My question on, hang on, let me grab 46. My question on 46 is exactly what we're going at here, because it says that we're going to have all activities targeted to promote an increase in vaccine confidence, and it's, media disseminating educational materials, trying to push this out more. That's what it's all around, and we've had a lot of these throughout COVID specifically, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of if this is relating to COVID or other vaccines in general, or both, because it doesn't say in the contract exactly what we're doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator Southworth. So this is a part of a RFA process for federal funds, a grant from the CDC. The immunization branch is 100% federally funded. And the grant calls for us to work with nonprofits, with community-based organizations, to improve the public's perception about their vaccine confidence. And so what this is going to do is they have a community advisory board in Jefferson County, and they are going to use that community advisory board to determine who are the best messengers on vaccine safety, and this is all vaccines, by the way. It's childhood vaccine specifically focused, because we know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many children, particularly in Jefferson County, have become behind on their childhood immunizations. And so this grant works with leaders in the faith community, leaders in the healthcare community, to determine why it is that parents aren't getting their children caught up on routine immunizations.
Okay, so as a follow-up, I'm on page 5 of the contract, and it says number 4 of the things we have to do is one is disseminating this newsletter called Why I Got the Vaccination. So are we really having babies talking about why they got vaccinated?
Babies?
Well, you said childhood vaccines, most of which
No.
happen before children are really able to talk about it.
Sure. So there are many vaccines given between the age of 0 to 2. So that would be parents who would be messaging why they gave their child the vaccine, not the babies.
Okay, so normally when we talk about outfits like the CDC, we talk about experts providing evidence-based information. This is a community program to have parents giving health advice to their friends that could be or is not accurate or whatever. And probably the reason this is happening is because maybe they have passed around information the CDC doesn't approve of.
Right.
And now we're going to make sure we only pass around the other side, even though we're talking about parents that probably don't know what they're even saying.
So the Community Advisory Board is actually zip code based in areas of low vaccination rate, and it does include members of the healthcare community. So it's not just parents on the Community Advisory Board. It's actually physicians, nurses and I have an actual list from the CAB membership will consist of representatives of organizations within the healthcare ecosystem, healthcare providers, social service organizations, and community residents of the target community.
Okay, that sounds nice. I'm just having a hard time looking through this contract, seeing exactly what you're saying, because it looks like to me, it doesn't say anything in here about childhood. It doesn't say anything about parents. And sometimes when we have ideas about what things are going to be, and then the contract language doesn't say that, and then the contract really is about something else, and it's not something we're talking about today. So that's kind of where the disconnect is for me.
So the grant guidelines for this funding is to improve vaccine confidence.
You mentioned all childhood vaccines. So is there a list on the ones we're working on the grant guidelines, or just randomly any vaccines?
The grant does not specifically list vaccines throughout the entire grant. It says vaccine confidence. But the list of vaccines required for children are on the immunization certificate for the state of Kentucky. I could provide you with that.
Well, we all know what that is because we're the ones that wrote it, but that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is we're talking about $500,000 here to do a media campaign that is not really specific in its contract. And that's a major issue. Is there any way that we can get the contract language to more accurately reflect the grant language if it is in fact the case, or are you just kind of projecting what you think the program is going to look like based on what you think the board members are going to decide relating to having parents to give testimony and so forth?
So again, the Community Advisory Board consists of healthcare providers and parents. It's not just parents doing the messaging.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to catch up here on this contract because I don't really see that in there either. So that's kind of where I'm getting to is I'd like the contract to reflect the project. It says here on number 1 on page 5 says a 10-member community advisory board representative of the community. Doesn't say anything here about health providers or parents or nothing like that. In any event, I just have major concerns, Mr. Chairman, about this kind of costs, this kind of lack of connectivity between money and content. So I guess I would just move to disapprove if that's something that we can move forward with.
Excuse me, would you want to disapprove or defer, since we don't have answers to a lot of questions?
I would
that you
like
have?
to defer if they have something they can work on, but I didn't hear that there was anything. So that's kind of where I'm going to
I
see
can
what we
provide
can
you
do.
with more information regarding the Community Advisory Board. I have that from the grantee.
Well, providing me more information doesn't change the language in the contract. What I'm trying to get to is the language in the contract does not match the discussion. So language needs to say what the money's being used for, and we can talk all the day long, we can send emails, but if it's not in the contract, then nothing's going to make sure it happens.
So do most contracts contain the entire work plan for a project?
A lot of them
I haven't
do,
seen
yes.
that today.
They'll have breakdowns on how the money's getting divided out. If the board's already been decided, who's on the board, what each of their roles are going to be. And some contracts come sketchy and some come detailed. And so when they come sketchy, and then I can see where your description could fit in this contract, but this contract does not necessarily reflect your description. So I would move to defer if that is something you guys want to consider amending the language of your contract to more clearly articulate what's going on. I can certainly.
I'd ask you to hold that motion until Senator Yates has an opportunity to ask a question or offer a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of times when I look at the contracts, having come from the Metro Council, a local body, I used to always frustrated when they wouldn't push for local control. I always say that so much of the state of Kentucky, they try to micromanage things that they're not experts in. And so I'd ask back for local control. Most of the members of this body would always agree. Yes, we're going to work on that. It's our project. You have right now federal money that's come in place with certain guidelines. Then we've laid out kind of the parameters. But I would not want to sit as a member of this committee and micromanage a board of local experts on how they're going to facilitate that. I want to say within the parameters of that contract, but you want to be able to have that local control with those local experts in those local communities in which they're experts. Now, I know me representing Jefferson County, some that going into it, I want to make sure they have that ability to be able to be successful. Sometimes when the federal government micromanages exactly how the things are to be done in Kentucky, they're not done very well. We talk about the frustration of the waste. We don't want to make that same mistake. We have federal money that's come through us to make sure it goes to our local boards, local committees in order to be able to do it better. Here we brought experts on the who are part of the committee, and then you got members of residents that are part of the committee to be able to help facilitate this correctly. So I think it's a positive thing, and I appreciate it being done this way, as opposed to us trying to over-legislate this bill that we do so often.
Thank you, and that is the main purpose of this grant funding, is to give the money to the boots on the ground in the community-based organizations. So thank you for recognizing that.
With that, is there a motion to defer or approve from anyone?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to defer if there is improvement that can be made. But I don't want to defer and just say, well, we're not going to do anything, and the next month we're right back where we are. So it kind of depends on, the agency. If you all have improvements you feel like you can make.
We could make some minor improvements, but what I like to point out is that any type of advertising that the board would want to do, we have to approve that beforehand. So we would make sure that it follows the guidelines of the grant. But we want to give them the leeway of determining what type of advertising works for the community itself.
I feel like the advertising part in here is a little bit already kind of covered, because it says conduct a media campaign to include 100 print ads, outdoor advertising at 50 locations, and 8 radio commercials. That's pretty specific. What's not specific is it seems specific to me. They're going to disseminate a newsletter, quote, why I got the vaccination, to communities that have been identified. Of course, the board's going to identify the communities. So all that seems specific, but none of it sounds like what you said was happening. That's where sounds like it is specific.
Let's take a different approach then. I think your desire to defer is too contingent on too many different factors. What I'd suggest is let's entertain a motion to approve. Should that motion fail, then let's entertain a motion to defer to give these folks an opportunity to come back and talk to us. So is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Senator Yates, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
I pass, but may I please explain my vote?
Yes, sir.
Nice programs. Over time, seems that we're having our community more and more educate our patient population. Problem is, many of them don't understand the intricacies of all of this. What I'd like to see is a program that encourages confidence in the providers who are treating patients. You know, hearsay is wonderful, and having my buddy tell me is wonderful, but I doubt that buddy stayed up 56 hours trying to learn some of this information. And I assure you that many physicians have. I don't want to kill it, and for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I pass.
Senator Southworth,
Explain my no vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I want to echo everything that Senator Douglas just said, because that's an excellent way to put a tip on this. I have a number of issues around this, but one of them is that, you know, if one person gets the vaccine and it worked for them, the next person, we don't know, they may have an issue and they're one of the people on the list that has to go sue to get life damages from our federal government. But then when it's not really a safe thing for people to be giving each other health advice like that. And marketing campaigns, like he said, are not necessarily the way to go for people really making important health decisions. And some people may not consider important health decisions, but it is important if you're the disabled person who was just seriously injured from a vaccine. And there are billions of dollars have been paid out to people like that. And you can't make those kind of decisions based on he said, she said. In fact, you're taking a risk regardless. We're always taking risks and signing waivers and so forth. But these kind of things, this is not the place and time to put out media information without really giving people the ins, outs, and buts about things. So I will vote no.
Senator Yates, yes. Representative Bowling,
Yes.
Representative Hart,
No.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Explain my vote.
Yes.
I vote yes. I side with Senator Yates on this. I believe the smaller element that you can push those decisions down to, that's where the best decision is going to be made. And I think on page 3, you clearly lay out the vaccination intervention in coordination with community partners as prioritized, the Community Advisory Board. And I think that's on you all to set that board up. I don't think that's something the legislature, we need to be doing that on every single contract that comes through here. It's way overburdensome government interference. I vote yes.
Chairman Meredith,
I vote aye and concur with my co-chair's views on this, but I think today we may have identified a bigger problem, and that's just the willingness to accept federal money without it really understanding what the requirements are associated with that. And I think maybe that was going to fall out of the purview of this committee, but I think at some point in time as a legislature, we need to address how federal funds are obtained and what the requirements are to receive those funds. It's sort of like I call it bureaucratic Oxycontin. You know, we get hooked on these funds without asking why we're getting them, and then we're hooked. But I'm not interested in getting the micromanagement of these things as well. So with that, my vote is I've got 4 A votes, 2 no, 1 pass. The measure passes. So let's move on to number 47.
Thank you.
Again, I see representatives coming forward. If you would, introduce yourself for the record, and Senator Southworth has questions regarding 47 as well.
Good morning, committee. My name is Brian Boisseau. I am the Health Program Administrator for the Kentucky State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program.
And I'm Elizabeth Anderson Hoagland. I'm the Section Supervisor of Health Promotion of the Kentucky Department for Public Health. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, Senator Southworth has questions.
Thank you. I'm looking at the contract, and the title that we were given was that we were going to work with this change today, change tomorrow to work on racial equity in providing resources. It seems like breastfeeding support and food shortage support. So at first I didn't see anything about racial equity. I really didn't know where that fit in, because if somebody's hungry, I don't really care what you look like or where your ancestors are from. But in letter, I'm on page 4 now here, letter B, services required, it says will partner with local black farmers or other local farms to procure 25% organic produce offered to the community. That's concerning, because how many black farmers are producing organic produce, and why are we going to require them to participate in provide 25% of the food when I don't think they represent 25% of the farms, unless I'm mistaken?
That's a really good point you bring up. We, with Change Today, Change Tomorrow, are allowing Change Today, Change Tomorrow to identify those farmers and to identify the amount of produce. They're not required to provide the farmers are not required to provide that 25%, but it is a goal of theirs to provide that 25% as part of the produce and fresh fruits and vegetables that they are going to give to the clientele of West Louisville.
So are we paying more for this produce than other markets, or why would they want to partner with us versus other places?
Well, we actually are not paying for any of the produce with this grant funding. This just allows Change Today, Change Tomorrow with some operational costs to be able to identify those farmers and try to get buy-in from those farmers to work with them with the local food pantry to provide fresh fruits and vegetables that they might not otherwise be getting. So that is just one of the strategies to address the food insecurity in that region.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness in trying to answer. I guess what I'm trying, it's confusing to me, because it seems like we're trying to make sure that black food goes to black neighborhoods. Sounds not very integrated to me. And I thought that kind of goes against my thought process, which is get food anywhere you can and get it to everyone you can. And if we've not been treating the black people right, then maybe the white people need to get more food. Like it's going backwards of everything I'm thinking. But I mean, it's great that everybody can get involved, but if they're just out of the goodness of their heart going to donate money to a community they maybe have lived in the past or have brothers and sisters live there, I still don't understand how that's best for them. Seems like it'd be best for them to sell it to some highfalutin company that sells organic produce at a high dollar, and they would get better deal out of that.
Well, a lot of what they're going to try to do is to get the excess produce that the local farmers, and it doesn't have to just be black farmers, it can be any local farm or agriculture operation that has excess food. But because Change Today, Change Tomorrow is unapologetically black-led for the community in which they live and reside, we think it's a really good opportunity for us to partner with them, because there's a lack of other organizations within that region that can provide the same services. We're also providing funding to food pantries in Todd County, as well as we're trying to work with Callaway County. So it's not just inner city Louisville that we're working with. We're also trying to incorporate Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky with our overall objectives of our grant. So this is just one of those areas that we're trying to affect that change in.
Okay, thank you. I do like the idea of not having food go to waste, and I don't like this, best by date means rotten on, so I'd like to get food out to wherever we can. I just don't want to end up with a bunch of bureaucracy that makes us not move it in the right place because somebody checked the wrong box. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Co-Chair Cook, you have a question, comment?
Not a question, just a comment on, so everybody in the committee knows, I have the contract in front of me. I just want to read that line. It says, will partner with local black farmers or other local farms to procure 25% organic produce on. But it does have the or in there. It's not a specific call out. I just want to make sure that the committee sees that.
Thank you.
I think that line probably could have been written differently, but it is there.
Live and learn.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? None. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Co-Chair Cook, seconded by Senator Yates. All those favoring the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the row.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Next item on the pool list with Transportation, Office of Secretary, and our number is 132, 136, 143 on the routine MOA pink list.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. I hope that you're doing well as well. I'm Jason Salala, Deputy State Highway Engineer for the Transportation Cabinet, here representing the Office of Highway Safety. With me, I have our Director of Purchases, Laura Hagan, and as well as our Assistant Director for the Division of Highway Safety Programs, Ryan Fisher.
Appreciate you joining us this morning. I have questions. Specifically, all these contracts that we're reviewing now are presented as not practical or feasible to bid. And in the explanation that we received, it outlines the process, but really doesn't tell me why they're not practical or feasible to bid. Can you elaborate on that? Let's start with United Arrive Alive Tour first.
Sure.
Unite Corporation.
So all of these contracts are a part of the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety's annual Highway Safety Plan, which is something that is federally funded, and we send an application into the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for. And so we take in applications from different groups. Well, I mean, it's an open application process, so we take in applications. They go through a process within the Office of Highway Safety that's also participated in by NHTSA. And basically what we're working on is items to improve highway safety for all users, not just vehicle occupants, but also motorcyclists, pedestrians, bicyclists, and other vulnerable road users. And so all of these contracts are the result of a grant application that we received through an open process, and then subsequently, these were included as a recommendation in our highway safety plan to NHTSA, which was then approved. And so when we go back through the process to get these contracts, if they are not with a public entity, like say a police agency or a public university or some of these other items, we need to go through the not practical to bid process. And Laura, feel free if I missed anything from the procurement side that's relevant there. I saw you unmute, Laura, but I don't hear you.
What's that? I need foot gear. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, you covered everything.
Well, possibly, but I'm more confused than was before I started. Is you say you take applications. Well, let me ask specifically, what does Unite Corporation do?
So they run a program called the Arrive Alive Tour, which is an educational program for schools and communities that basically they run educational programs using a distracted, drunken, and drug driving simulator to educate drivers on the dangers of impaired driving and distracted driving, and also what the effects of those can be, not only to themselves, but also to their families and their communities.
And how was this vendor selected?
They put in an application when we had our application process open through the Office of Highway Safety, and they placed an application, and it went through our process, our internal process within the Office of Highway Safety to look at programs and to look at applications. And Ryan, if you want to jump in there and talk a little bit more about that process, you're welcome to.
Well, I'm more curious. How many applications did you receive?
Well over 100, but I don't have that number specifically in front of me. I can get it for you though if you'd like.
Well, are we caught up on a matter of semantics here? It looks like you kind of go through a bid process that you receive applications and they're selected by this group of 8 that you referred to. Is that fair?
That's correct, sir.
So it kind of is a bid process, but it's not called a bid process. It's an application review process.
That's correct. And Laura, if you have any information on kind of how that works through the procurement lens, I would be appreciative of that. But what I can say is that we do have these applications open for anybody that would like to apply, that provides these types of services related to improving behaviors and awareness of highway traffic safety issues and opportunities to improve highway traffic safety. Each year we do that as a part of this process. So Laura, can you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is one firm out of several that you received applications from. It was vetted by the committee, and they chose this company, Unite Corporation. Is that correct?
That is correct. But just to be clear, in the grant application process, I didn't. The Office of Highway Safety asked for applications to improve highway safety, not specifically to run this program. So this is a vendor that came to us with an application to run this program throughout Kentucky. It is evidence-based, and they were selected along with people that run other different types of programs, as you saw in some of the other places in the list that you pulled.
Well, explain to me then the other contracts that have pulled that were awarded to Kentucky Association of Chiefs of Police. Go through that process for me.
Sure. So, and that's the same general process where we have that application process open for groups to apply to improve highway traffic safety. Now, if you look at those ones with the Kentucky Associations of Chiefs of Police, there's 6 of those that are for services related to what we would call law enforcement liaisons. And 4 of those are regional and do general highway safety type outreach and liaison activities with local law enforcement. And 2 of them are specifically related to impaired driving, drug recognition expert program, and the drug evaluation and classification program.
Did anyone else submit applications for this particular segment of the program?
Well, all of the applications come in a particular pool. We did not receive, to my knowledge, and Ryan, please jump in. We did not receive, to my knowledge, any other applications for these particular types of services.
That is correct, yes.
I'm not going to say I understand it, but in the interest of time, I don't have any other questions. Anyone else have a question? If not, entertain a motion to approve 132, 136 through 143.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Representative Bowling. Is there a second? Second by Senator Yates. All in favor vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for being available to us this morning.
Thank you.
Next item on the pool list with Department of Community-Based Services is number 28 on the Memorandum Agreement Amendment 10 list.
Good morning. I'm Mary Carpenter with DCBS. I'm an executive advisor.
Being available to me this morning. And this is a huge contract.
Yes, sir.
And it says provide funds for services in regard to children review panel, which set up to determine whether state or local agency are effectively discharging their child protective responsibilities. And we're increasing it by $856,000. I guess that's my first question: is why the necessity to increase by almost $1 million?
So the contract started initially, to answer your question about the Citizens Review Panel, it started initially for that purpose. It has grown over the years. We're increasing the contract at the request of Eastern Kentucky University. We're transitioning our public child welfare certification program, which is a pre-employment program that prepares social workers to come directly into practice. So they get that training before, while they're still in college, rather than having to take the training once they are employed. So currently they're getting that through Eastern Kentucky University. EKU has requested not to be that provider anymore, so they've requested that we transition that from their university. So that's why we're moving it to UK, because they're wanting to only focus on staff training post. There's some management that's required for this, for the PCWCP program, so we're transitioning it to a new university. With that, we are sort of trying to restructure that to focus more on recruitment, marketing, to do some rebranding of the program. As you know, we have a workforce shortage, so we're doing some restructuring of the program with this opportunity to transition it. So with the $800,000, there is some, it includes some of those transition costs. $400,000 of that is tuition. If there is some, with this transition pieces to cover the cost of the tuition, we reimburse these students for tuition. So $400,000 of that is the tuition. The other, there's a line item, $75,000, that is to launch a portal that is not currently included in our programming. So it's a technology piece that would not be ongoing once we transition from EKU to UK. So there's a little bit of a launch where we're transitioning universities.
This is first in my legislative career that a university is willing to give up a program. Can you give me some insight?
They've actually been doing this. We're moving several pieces from EKU to other universities, so to a couple of other universities as well. But they want to focus primarily on staff training, so we're actually moving several pieces to a couple of other universities as well. So you may see me again if you want, if you pull the contracts.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just a little bit bewildered by that, and that's what caught my attention. But
yeah.
Are there any other questions, comments? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Representative Hart made the motion, seconded by Co-Chair Cook. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Douglas,
I'm going to pass.
Senator Southworth,
Aye.
Senator Yates, Representative Bowling, Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Mentor, Representative Cook,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you for being available to us this morning. Last, but obviously not least, waiting for the drum roll. It's on the pulled list is from Attorney General's office is number 2 on the MOA for $50,000 and under gray list. Please identify yourself for the record, and I have questions.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chairman. My name is Amy Burke. I'm the assistant.
Is your mic on? I'm not sure that it is.
It is.
Green, okay.
Good morning, Chairman Meredith. My name is Amy Burke. I'm the Assistant Deputy Attorney General over our criminal division within the Office of Attorney General.
And I'm Stacy Woodrum. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Administrative Services. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience and endurance. And we should give you some kind of medal of award, but we don't have one, so we'll maybe can get you out here as soon as possible. Probably y'all didn't get the memo that I don't like contracts with companies from California. And this one is particularly disturbing to me. And just remind you again that the reason I take this position is that Xavier Becerra, when he was Attorney General of California, passed his own edict that state employees could not come from California to Kentucky in protest of legislation that we passed back in 2018, which had absolutely no impact on California whatsoever. But he took that action, so he's in effect boycotting our economy. And California continues that situation. So again, my concern is not with the substance of the contract. What you're trying to accomplish is, why do we want to support California when California doesn't support us?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to tell you a little bit about the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, they're a program out of the Alliance for Hope, which is based out of California. They're a nonprofit there. They were launched in 2011. They're developed in response to increasing demand for intimate partner violence and strangulation crimes with training and technical assistance. So they provide consulting, planning, support services, technical assistance, web-based education program, a directory of national trainers, so not all based out of California. One of the trainers is Dr. Smock, who is based here in Louisville, Kentucky, and experts, and also a clearinghouse of all research related to domestic violence and sexual assault strangulation crimes. The reason that they were chosen, they provided back in 2021 a web-based program to us during COVID that our prosecutors and other allied professionals, law enforcement, social workers responded very kindly to. They very much liked the information. A lot of the feedback we received was, we would like to bring these folks back in an in-person type setting to spend more time with us. So that's what we set out to do. And I understand completely what you're saying about California. They are the preeminent trainers on this area of the law, especially their clearinghouse. This institute trains over 8,000 professionals per year, sir, on this topic. Not all our trainers are California-based. We've got, of course, Dr. Bill Smock from Kentucky, who's here during our training, and Joe Bianca from New Jersey, who's a prosecutor there. After they are done here in Kentucky, this institute will be training folks in Stark County, Ohio. They'll be making a couple of stops in Georgia. They'll be stopping in Billings, Montana to put on this training. And another reason we specifically focused on them was it was the ability for our strangulation task force, which is comprised of our Kentucky folks, our law enforcement, our first responders, our prosecutors, our social workers, our forensic nurse examiners, to sort of tell them exactly what we wanted to see. This is a higher level, I guess what I would call boutique level training. And they were able to work in the months pre this training in getting exactly what we needed in Kentucky. And one area that Kentucky is taking the lead on is pediatric strangulation. And that's an area that our folks are very in line with, and we've seen an uptick in that. Unfortunately, there was a case out of northern Kentucky within the past month where a 13-year-old was a victim of strangulation. So because they have this national clearinghouse of research, and because they draw on such a wide pool of trainers from all over the United States, and because we do have this focus very much on this newer part of strangulation, which is the pediatric portion of it, we felt like they were the best fit to bring the best possible top-notch training to our folks here in Kentucky. And that is the only reason we went with this place based out of California, sir.
Can't argue with you, and the only reason I'm against the contract is it's from California.
I understand completely.
You know, I think that I would respectfully request that Attorney General Cameron maybe send a letter to the Attorney General, the current Attorney General in California, and say, we've got a difficult to deal with chairman of our Government Contract Review Committee who always wants to kill California contracts, and would you consider repealing your ban on Kentucky? And I think that's a reasonable request on my part, and all it takes is a postage stamp and a couple of minutes to do it. But I just have a difficult time with a person trying to impose California standards on Kentucky, and that's what he's attempting to do. And I don't know how else to protest that action. It was taken to hurt the economy of Kentucky. It is minimal, I recognize that, but still, I think it's above and beyond the scope and responsibilities and duty of a state attorney general to do that. So again, I would move to approve this contract, but I would respectfully request that Attorney General Cameron possibly send correspondence to the Attorney General in California saying, let's have a ceasefire.
I cannot disagree with you, sir.
All right, thank you. That, I'll make the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hart. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll for the final time during this.
History being made in the government contract review.
Yeah, history's being made.
Senator Douglas.
I vote aye, but I'll explain my vote.
Well, certainly, sir.
You know, I agree with Senator Meredith with some of the things that he said, but you've done a wonderful job, and I thank you both this morning for coming. I think you've done a wonderful job of explaining this, and I really want you to know that this committee appreciates that. Thank you.
Senator Southworth.
Aye.
Senator Yates. Representative Bowling.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes, I'd like to explain my vote.
Oh, certainly. Thank you, sir.
Like Senator Meredith, I've been on the committee and we've been fighting this or protesting this since 2018, 2019. And the frustrating thing is, it seems like we just constantly get ignored about this. We have no other avenue to make our voices heard about the contracts in California. There's a lot of good companies in California, but when their state takes an action against our state, my loyalty is with the state of Kentucky, not with California. So when they intentionally try to hurt the state of Kentucky, I'm going to vote down every California contract I can. However, this is the second time I've made an exception. I am making an exception, and one of the big reasons is because we have somebody out of Louisville that is helping facilitate works for them. So I will make the exception for and support our Louisville doctor there. However, at some point, I wish the executive branch, other committees, other constitutional officers would just set up, we need to make a voice. For Kentucky needs to make a stand for Kentucky. And I think the Attorney General out in California was completely out of line and out of his purview to do what he did, but yet we've not made any efforts as a state as a whole to combat that. So my request is, and encourage all your colleagues and everybody, let's stand up for Kentucky and stop just taking it on the chin.
Representative Mentor. Representative Cook.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
I vote aye. It's because I think Representative Hart and I both want to extend the olive branch to our other states in the United States. And after this meeting, he and I are going to the Middle East to see if we can't negotiate peace there. But again, I vote aye, and with that, the motion passes. But thank you for being here this morning, and appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
With that, please remember that our next meeting is November 9th, because the Tuesday is, what is Tuesday? Election Day. It's on November 8th, so we will be meeting on November 9th at 9 a.m. in this room. With that, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion, second, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right, thank you all.